My name is Adele Morgan. I am 65 years old, and I spent most of my life running a small accounting office in town. Numbers made sense to me. People, sometimes less so. But I always believed that if you gave love quietly and consistently, it would come back to you the same way. I was wrong, at least for a while. Christmas Day was supposed to be warm, even in the cold. A place at the table, laughter from the children, that smell of cinnamon and roasted ham. I drove to my son's house with a plate of homemade waffles, the same ones my mother made for me, and a blue scarf I knitted for my granddaughter Ellie. I parked out front, took a deep breath, and told myself that today would be gentle. Today, I would belong. Inside, the house glowed with gold and red. Holiday music hummed. My daughter-in-law, Leah, glanced at me like I was late to a show that had already started. I smiled anyway. I had brought a tin box with the family waffle recipe inside. Brendan loved those waffles when he was little. He used to call them snowflakes you can eat. I set the tin carefully on the kitchen counter, next to the blue scarf and the cookies I baked at dawn. Then I walked into the dining room. 6 chairs around the table, 6 name cards set neatly on white plates. I moved closer, expecting to see my name somewhere. I didn't. Instead, one card caught my eye. In fancy gold lettering, it read, Nana Marge. My son's mother-in-law. She stood right behind me, wearing perfume too strong and a smile too satisfied. She placed her hand on the back of the chair that should have been mine. I looked at Brendan, my only child, the boy I raised alone after his father died. He adjusted his tie, unable to meet my eyes. "Mom," he said, in a voice that tried to sound casual. "We only invited those who truly matter." There are moments when a heart doesn't break with noise. It just folds. I stood still, my fingers resting on the back of another chair. Ellie and June ran around with new toys, laughing, unaware that a grandmother had just been erased in front of them. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. Instead, I nodded slowly, as if his sentence was something perfectly normal. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up the scarf, and pressed it to my face for one quiet second. It smelled like home, like yesterday, like everything I hoped to still be. In the stillness, I realized something important. I mattered, even if they pretended I didn't. I set the scarf down gently. The tin box with the recipe remained untouched, the cookies still warm. No one asked why I was leaving the room. No one asked if I had eaten yet, not even my son. I stepped back into the living room. Ellie noticed me first. "Grandma, are you leaving?" she asked, still holding her little unicorn. I bent down and kissed the top of her head. "I'll see you later, sweetheart," I whispered. She didn't understand. Not yet. But someday she would. I reached the door. My coat felt heavier than usual, like it carried the weight of every Christmas before this one. I opened it quietly, letting the cold air brush my face. Before stepping outside, I paused. That chair, that name card, that sentence. Those 3 things would change everything. They just didn't know it yet. I closed the door behind me, and my shoes crunched into the fresh snow. I didn't cry until I reached my car. But even then, I kept my tears silent. Silent hurts can be the loudest, especially when witnessed only by God and winter. I sat in the driver's seat, hands freezing on the steering wheel. My phone lit up. A photo from Leah's social media appeared. 5 smiling faces around a table. 5. The caption read, "Christmas lunch with the ones who truly matter." I stared at that picture until the screen went dark. Some stories begin with a celebration. Mine begins with a chair that wasn't mine anymore. Before driving away, I looked at their house one last time. The lights twinkled, the music played, and I knew they wouldn't realize I was gone until dessert. Maybe not even then. On that empty street, I made a decision I never thought I would make. The love I gave so quietly for decades, I would no longer allow it to be taken for granted. If they didn't want me at their table, they wouldn't need my support either. Love and boundaries can coexist. Sometimes they must. I turned the key in the ignition. The radio played a soft carol, something about peace on earth. Peace, I thought. I will have that again, someday. Before I drove off, a small question formed in my mind. What would happen when they realized the trust account was not unending? What would they do when the free support they assumed would last forever suddenly stopped? Maybe they would learn who truly mattered then. And maybe, just maybe, they would come to understand that respect is a seat you never steal. If you've ever had a moment when your worth was dismissed by those you love, stay with me. This is not just my story. It's for anyone who has been quietly pushed aside. We deserve better. We can choose better. And sometimes, walking away is how you remind them who you are. As I drove down the silent road, the snow falling heavier now, I whispered to myself, I matter. It didn't feel powerful yet, but it was a start, a beginning. And beginnings often come disguised as endings. I could have turned the car around and knocked on the door, demanded my place, demanded my chair. But dignity has its own direction, and mine pointed forward. I drove slowly through the falling snow until I reached the small town square. The shops were closed, their windows frosted with lights that felt too cheerful for the ache in my chest. I parked near the bank because habit guided me there. When your heart is hurt, you go where your mind is strongest. I stepped out, pulling my coat tighter. Snowflakes landed on my eyelashes and melted into the warmth of my anger. I walked, letting the cold numb what pride could not protect. I had spent years making sure Brendan and his family were secure. College savings for Ellie and June, trust disbursements, paying for repairs they never thanked me for. I told myself it was love. But love is not an obligation others get to define. Lights glowed inside the bank's ATM vestibule, so I went in to warm my fingers. I opened the banking app. My thumb hovered over the trust settings. Would this make me cold? Cruel? No. What happened earlier had already drawn the line. I pressed the option to lock further access. A prompt appeared asking if I was sure. I whispered, Yes, I am sure. With one tap, responsibility returned to where it began. Next, I called Samuel, the bank manager who had known me since Brendan was young. He confirmed my authority and made the change. His voice softened. If you need anything else, Adele, you call me. Simple, efficient, respectful. The opposite of how my day had started. As I left, a memory struck me. Leah once told her friends online, "We're building our future with family support." She meant my support. I pulled up my phone again and scrolled through her posts. Photos of gifts I bought, vacations I paid for, always credited to someone else. I took screenshots and saved them. Not for revenge, for truth. The night air reminded me I was still alive and still in control. I crossed the street to my car, but paused when I saw the pharmacy light on. Candy canes and stuffed reindeer smiled through the window. A reminder of what this day was supposed to feel like. I walked home. The snow beneath my boots made a quiet crunch. As I reached my porch, the motion sensor light flicked on, almost welcoming. Inside, warmth wrapped around me like a soft blanket. My small living room felt like the only place in the world where I still belonged. I removed my coat. The scarf I had made for Ellie was still folded inside. I set it on my dining table, draping it over a chair that would always be mine. I sat and let silence have the first word. My fingers traced the table. Every gift of support came back to me. Tuition help, holiday bills, repairs, meals. I reached for the folder in a drawer. Receipts, statements, emails. A quiet history of everything I poured into their lives. I smoothed the papers, lining them up like soldiers ready for battle. Not anger, not revenge, just record keeping. When love is dismissed, facts speak. I wrote a note to keep the 529 untouched for the children. They are not the ones who hurt me. They still deserve opportunity. But the rest would change. Support would now have boundaries. Then I opened my email and typed to Gina, the property manager for the rental house I owned. Effective immediately, please prepare a 30-day notice and review all furniture under the lease agreement. She confirmed quickly, wishing me a Merry Christmas. I almost laughed at how strange those words sounded tonight. My phone buzzed with holiday greetings. I replied to none. I needed this silence. It was my companion tonight. Snowflakes drifted under the street lamp outside. Somewhere out there, my granddaughters were finishing lunch. Somewhere out there, a chair with my place was filled by someone who had no right to it. A part of me wondered if Brendan would call, if guilt would find its way through the noise of that house. But I didn't wait for it. Waiting is a trap disguised as hope. I brewed tea. The kettle whistled sharply. I poured, steam rising. I walked to my cedar chest in the corner. It held pieces of my past. Baby shoes, drawings, love once uncomplicated. I rested my hand on the lid, not ready to open it yet. Tonight was for choosing a different future. I sat again, sipping slowly. The warmth spread through me. The glow of the tree lights filled the room. They twinkled quietly, patient, unlike the ones at Brendan's house. My heart steadied. I thought back to Ellie's question. "Grandma, are you leaving?" I wished I could have told her the truth. That I was not leaving them. I was leaving the pain. One day, she would understand that. Outside, the snowfall grew thick and soft. A fresh star forming. New footprints would come in their time. When respect returned. When love remembered itself. For now, this house was enough. I was enough. Tomorrow, I would take the next step. But tonight, I let clarity rest beside me. I finished my tea, placed the cup in the sink, and whispered into the quiet room. I matter. This time, the words felt stronger. I chose myself tonight. Finally. The next morning, sunlight pushed its way through the curtains as if it was determined to wake me before regret did. I sat up slowly, my back stiff from yesterday's emotions. I boiled water for coffee and waited for it to brew, staring at the empty chair across from me. No name card needed. It was mine. I opened my phone again. It was the first morning in years that I wasn't waiting for a message from Brendan or a picture of the girls unwrapping gifts. I expected nothing now, but the screen seemed eager to remind me of my place anyway. Leah had posted more photos, the children in matching pajamas, Marjorie handing out presents with a practiced air of importance. And in the caption, Leah wrote, "Family is who shows up for you." I looked long at that line. I had shown up every day of their lives. Scrolling further, I found a short video clip. Ellie holding out a plate of cookies. I could almost smell the chocolate chips through the screen. In the background, I heard someone correcting her. Say thank you to Grandmama. The name hit like a cold wave. They wanted her to unlearn me, to erase me not just from the table, but from her language, from her memories. My thumb hovered over the screen, tempted to write a comment, to remind them that I existed. But I stopped. I would not beg for space in a place that pretended I had none. I put the phone down and poured my coffee. Each sip brought a little more clarity, a little more strength. The truth was simple. If they were choosing to rewrite the story of our family online, I would write reality where it counted. I drove to church even though there was no service that morning. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for Reverend Cole's old car. He always arrived early and left late. I walked inside, the quiet echoing around me. He noticed me approaching and smiled the same gentle, knowing smile he had given me since the day he baptized Brendan. Adele, he said softly, I didn't expect to see you today. I needed air, I replied, and perspective. We sat in a small room filled with couches worn by confessions and prayers. I told him everything. Not every detail, but enough. Enough for him to understand the bruise beneath my ribs. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned forward slightly. You know, he said, love doesn't disappear because someone forgets its name. Your grandchildren know who you are. Their hearts know. Children see truth long before adults do. I felt something loosen inside me, a knot that grief had tied too tightly. But I'm not going to chase a chair anymore, I whispered. And you shouldn't, he answered. Respect is a seat someone pulls out for you, not one you fight to keep. I breathed slowly, absorbing every word. He wasn't telling me to forgive quickly or pretend it didn't hurt. He was giving me permission to protect myself. Before I left, he asked if we could pray. I nodded. Not for them, not yet. For me, for strength, for calm justice. When I stepped back into the cold air, something inside had shifted. I didn't need public approval. I didn't need to be in their photographs to matter. And I certainly didn't need to argue with anyone who chose to rewrite my role. I got home and took out a notebook. I wrote down 3 sentences, carefully and boldly. I will not explain my worth. I will not beg for space. I will protect my peace. I tore the page neatly and pinned it to the fridge. My phone buzzed again. A new post. This time a family portrait. Marjorie centered perfectly, Leah at her side, Brendan stiff and smiling, Ellie and June sitting in front, unaware of the story being staged around them. The caption, "Blessed with the best grandma." I stared at that picture for a long time. The words didn't sting as much as they clarified. Blessed with the best grandma, they wrote. If that was true, then why did Ellie look off camera, as if searching for someone who wasn't there? Why did her little hand clutch the scarf I had knitted beneath a new sweater, barely visible? A secret touch point. A thread of loyalty. Children know the truth. I set the phone down, not in anger, but in certainty. Let them crop me out. Let them caption me away. I would not disappear. And soon, they would learn that love is not the same as access. Respect is not inherited. And support is not guaranteed. That evening, as I folded laundry, the silence in my home felt different. Yesterday it was cold. Today it was protective, strong, mine. I caught my reflection in the window. For the first time in a long while, I looked like a woman who remembered her own value. I woke up before dawn, long before the sun could decide whether it wanted to rise on my life the way it had before. I made oatmeal and sat at my kitchen table, staring again at the chair across from me. My chair. The thought steadied me. I breathed in and let the soft quiet remind me that I still had a home, a history, and proof that I had always shown up. Today was not about sorrow. It was about preparation. After breakfast, I walked to the living room and knelt in front of the cedar chest that had traveled with me through every chapter of my life. My father built it by hand when I was 16 and told me, "Store what matters most. Wood will keep your memories safe." I traced the grain with my fingers, remembering the steady sound of his hammer and the way he smiled when he finished the lid. He made it strong because he wanted me to have something that would never fall apart. I lifted the lid slowly. The smell of cedar filled the air, warm and clean like a memory that never turned sour. Inside were pieces of my life that no one could take from me. Brendan's first pair of sneakers, the hospital bracelet from the day he was born, drawings the girls made just last month when they sat at this very table and called me grandma without hesitation. I picked up a Christmas card Ellie had made last year. Her handwriting, crooked and sweet, spelled out, "You are my Christmas miracle." I pressed the card to my chest for a moment. That was the truth of my role, not captions, not seats assigned by someone who barely knew me. Beneath the keepsakes were folders, practical things, bank statements, receipts, contract copies, notes scribbled in margins, evidence of years of stepping up quietly, paying what needed paying without anyone asking or thanking. There was a folder I rarely opened. It held documents related to the trust account and the rental property lease. I carried it to the table and laid everything out neatly. I felt like a woman reclaiming her narrative one sheet of paper at a time. Then I called Carmen. Carmen Alvarez had been my lawyer once before, during a difficult moment when I nearly lost the house after my husband passed. She defended me with sharp words and a heart that felt like fire. We had stayed in touch. When she answered, she used her warm, firm voice that always made me stand taller. "Adele, Merry Christmas. What can I do for you?" I told her everything that had happened. I did not dramatize. I did not exaggerate. I simply stated facts the way a ledger tells the truth. She listened quietly until I finished, and then said, "I want you to understand something clearly. The trust belongs to you. The house belongs to you. Every dollar you have provided was given voluntarily. They have no claim. If they want support, they will have to treat you with respect. We can make everything airtight." "Airtight," I repeated, liking how the word felt. She asked me to gather all proof of my financial contributions. I looked at the papers already waiting in front of me. "I'm ready," I said, and I meant it. Once the call ended, I contacted Owen. He had been my accountant for 8 years, a man who believed numbers should always tell the truth. When I explained what I needed, he didn't sound surprised. "I've kept a complete ledger of your support records, every check, every bill, every deposit into their household. I can have a printed package for you tomorrow." His efficiency gave me confidence. This was not petty. This was responsible. This was me drawing boundaries that should have been there years ago. I organized everything into a binder: dates, amounts, areas of support. There is a particular power in names, numbers, and signatures collected neatly. It was not revenge. It was accountability. Something adults teach children, ironically, something my own son seemed to have forgotten. As the work settled into a stack of undeniable truth, I felt stronger. My heart didn't ache the same way it did yesterday. Pain had become purpose. I stood and walked to the window. Snow still covered the road, softening the world into something that looked peaceful even while so much was complicated beneath its surface. That was the thing about life. Beauty and hurt existed in the same places. My phone rang. For the first second, I hoped it was Brendan. It wasn't. It was an automated alert. The secondary credit card I issued for Leah had been declined. I watched the notification disappear from the screen. I didn't feel satisfaction, only clarity. Choices carry consequences, even quiet ones. I looked again at the binder of documents. Each page was a reminder. I mattered as more than just a babysitter or a source of funds. I mattered as a mother, as a provider, as a woman with her own story. I returned to the cedar chest and placed the binder inside it beside the keepsakes. This chest held two kinds of truths now, the emotional and the factual. Together they formed the full picture of who I was, not erased, not replaced. My phone buzzed again, a text from Reverend Cole. Remember, boundaries can be love in disguise. Proud of you. I smiled, feeling a warmth inside that no holiday fire could create. Later, as evening settled in, I sat at my table with a cup of mint tea. I folded Ellie's scarf again and laid it gently beside me. I closed my eyes and imagined her laughter echoing in my home once more. Someday soon, I promised myself. Not on their terms, on mine. The truth was this: if love was real, it would find its way back. And when it did, I would be here, solid, unmoved, a grandmother worth showing up for. Before bed, I whispered another promise into the quiet. I will no longer ask to matter. I will act like I do. 1 week can feel like a lifetime when you finally choose yourself. 7 days passed slowly, but each day grew lighter. I spent the first few mornings cleaning corners of the house I had ignored, rearranging picture frames, and knitting a second blue scarf just in case Ellie ever needed it. Every evening ended with tea and the quiet knowledge that I had made a decision I would not reverse. During that week, Brendan did not call. Leah did not text. Marjorie stayed silent. The absence of their voices used to frighten me. Now it revealed how much I had been holding together on my own. I checked on the trust, the lease, the accounts. Everything stayed locked, paused, or in review. I felt protected for the first time in a long time. On the 7th day, snow fell again, thicker than before. I was stirring soup on the stove when I heard the knock. A fast, frantic knock that didn't match the calm I had built inside my home. I turned off the burner and walked slowly to the door, wiping my hands on a towel. Through the frosted glass, I saw 3 silhouettes, then 4. My heart knew them before my eyes could. Brendan, Leah, Marjorie, and 2 small shapes bundled in coats and fear. I did not open the door right away. That alone felt like reclaiming oxygen. "Mom," Brendan's voice cracked. "Mom, can you please open? We need to talk." I could hear the panic behind the words, not concern. Panic. I rested my hand on the doorknob. Silence can be powerful. I let it speak for me first. Leah tried next. "Adele, there must have been some mistake with the trust. We can fix this if we meet. We have bills due, school fees. You know how much we rely." She stopped herself before finishing the sentence, but the unfinished part hung in the air. "Rely on you." Marjorie's voice joined, sharper than the cold wind outside. "These actions are hurting the girls. You shouldn't punish them for adult issues." Her tone assumed she still had authority over morality. She never did. Punish. That was the word she chose. Not protect. Punish. I finally spoke, my voice steady through the door. "I am protecting them, and I am protecting myself." Brendan stepped closer. I could almost feel his breath against the glass. "Mom, please, just give us 60 days. We'll figure things out. I promise." That word, promise, should have meant something, but he had spent it too many times without paying for it. My heart ached when I heard Ellie whimper. "Grandma, are you mad at us?" The question pierced me deeper than any adult could. I pressed my hand flat against the door, imagining her tiny palm on the other side. "No, sweetheart," I whispered, knowing she might not hear. "Never at you." Leah tried to sound composed, but desperation leaked into every syllable. "Could you please reconsider? The kids don't need this stress." Stress caused by what? Their erasure of me? Their entitlement? Their belief that family love came with a price tag I would endlessly pay? I closed my eyes. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw a dining chair with a name card that wasn't mine. I saw my scarf rolled aside like clutter. I saw the caption that declared who mattered. I saw myself leaving quietly so they could enjoy the meal I helped fund. They thought I would always swallow the hurt. They were wrong. I unlocked my phone instead of the door. I dialed Carmen. She answered on the first ring. "It's time," I said softly. "I'll file the next step today," she replied. "Do not open that door if you don't want to. You do not owe them a conversation at your threshold." Her certainty steadied me. She reminded me of everything I had chosen for myself. I hung up and took another breath. Brendan knocked again, harder this time. "Mom, please. We're freezing out here." I stepped back from the door, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. "Brendan," I said, "you told me who mattered. I listened. Now you can listen too. Respect is the only key that opens my door. When you find it, come back." There was a long pause. Snow tapped the porch like tiny fingers begging to be let in. Leah sniffed, trying to hold back tears. Marjorie muttered something about being embarrassed. I almost smiled. Then I heard the soft sound that unraveled me a little. Ellie's glove rubbing the door. "Grandma, did you get my picture?" She sounded hopeful and confused. I swallowed hard. "I did, and I loved it." I pressed my forehead gently against the wood. "I love you very much." Her small voice trembled. "We miss you." "I miss you too," I whispered. I needed to be strong for her, for June, for me. Brendan exhaled, defeated. "We'll call," he said. His voice was small. For once, he sounded like the little boy who used to run to my arms when he scraped his knee. Footsteps crunched away slowly. I watched their shapes through the window. 2 adults supporting their entitlement like heavy luggage, one grandmother whose power was slipping through her fingers, and 2 little girls glancing back until the snow swallowed them from view. The silence returned, warm and righteous. I locked the deadbolt fully and drew the curtain shut. My chest shook once, but not with fear, with liberation. I walked back to the stove, lit the burner again, and stirred the soup. The house felt safe. The air felt mine. The future felt different, sharp but honest. As I sat at my table, I looked at the scarf beside me. Soon, those little arms would wrap in it again. I believed that. Children always return to love. I dipped my spoon into the bowl and tasted the broth. Salt, herbs, warmth, nourishment I gave myself. I didn't slam a door. I simply closed it. And sometimes, that is loud enough. The morning after they stood on my porch, I woke with a strange calm in my chest. A week ago, I would have risen with worry, trying to think of ways to fix things or smooth them over. But this morning, I stretched my hands beneath the warm blanket and thought, they know where I stand now. Clarity can be a door that stays shut until the right knock comes. I brewed coffee and set 2 cups on the table out of habit. One for me, one for a memory of Brendan as a child, feet dangling from a chair too tall for him, asking if Santa would still visit Daddy in heaven. Back then, I promised him I would make sure every Christmas still felt full. I kept that promise longer than anyone noticed. My phone lit with a text from Brendan. "Mom, can I come by today? Alone?" There was something humble in that last word. I agreed. Noon. I spent the next hour gathering the courage I hadn't needed in years past. When mothers defend their children, they roar. When mothers defend themselves from their children, they whisper steel. When he arrived, I opened the door without hesitation. Brendan stepped inside with slow steps, and in his face I saw a man who finally realized how far arrogance can bend you before you break. His eyes were puffy, the kind you get from a night spent learning hard truths. We sat at the kitchen table, the table that had held every birthday candle, every late-night homework assignment, every bill I paid without question. "Mom," he began, voice rough. "I'm sorry. I should have spoken up. I should have told them you mattered." I looked at him for several seconds. Eye contact was the only way to make sure he understood that sorry is not a bandage for a wound he kept reopening. "You didn't just fail to speak up," I said quietly. "You agreed." He winced. There was no defense left in him. He rubbed his hands together. "We're in trouble. Leah maxed her card and I didn't know how bad the bills were. We thought the trust would cover things. We thought family takes care of each other." I nodded once. Family does, but not at the cost of their dignity. He looked around the house, as if noticing for the first time that everything here had been earned, not given. "We need help, Mom." This was the moment I had prepared for, the moment where I could fold again or stay standing straight. I slid a small sheet of paper across the table, 3 handwritten lines. Respect in all things. Honesty about finances. Self-reliance for adults. Support reserved for children. "My rules," I said. "Not demands, boundaries." Brendan's shoulders sagged with a mix of relief and shame. "I can agree to that." "It's not about agreeing," I replied. "It's about living it." He glanced toward the living room and spotted a picture frame face down on the bookshelf. He stood, walked over, and picked it up. It was a photo of me holding Ellie the day she was born. Leah had placed a framed picture of Marjorie right in front of it last year, blocking it out. Brendan looked at that picture now like it was the first time he understood what had happened. "I'm sorry," he whispered again, holding the frame gently. "I let things get tilted." I rose and joined him by the shelf. "Tilted can be fixed," I said. "Broken is harder." He stared at Ellie's tiny baby fingers frozen in print. "The girls miss you. Ellie asks about you every night." Warmth flickered in me. That was the flame worth protecting. "Tell me something," I said, returning to the table. "Did she notice I wasn't there at Christmas?" He sat back down, guilt sitting beside him. "She cried when she realized your chair was empty." My heartbeat tightened. Even at 7 years old, she understood chairs and names and who deserves to be present. I leaned forward. "I will never punish those girls. But I will no longer allow you or Leah to act like my love is an entitlement. I have always been here. Now I need to be respected here." He nodded, holding the rules with both hands like they might steady him. "I'll talk to Leah," he said. "Things have to change." "They do," I answered. "And not in words, in choices." Brendan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Thank you for seeing me today." You are my son, I said simply. That truth didn't need decoration. He stood to leave, and as he reached the hallway, he turned around. Mom, is there anything you need from me? It was a sincere question, maybe the first he had asked me in years. I need you to remember who raised you, I said. And I need you to stop letting anyone else rewrite that. He nodded again, firmer this time. He walked to the door and paused with his hand on the knob. Can I bring the girls next time? He asked, hope sneaking back into his voice. I allowed myself a small smile. When the time is right. He stepped outside into the quiet snow, but before the door closed, he bent down. Something on the porch had caught his eye. A gold name card with perfect calligraphy. Nana Marge. It must have fallen from their coat pile last week. He picked it up, stared at it, then looked at me as if fully seeing the insult carved into that card. Without asking, he tore it in half. The paper split with a soft rip that sounded like the first note of a better song. I'll earn back your trust, he said. Not your money, you. The door closed gently, and the house fell silent again. But this time, silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like the first breath after a storm. I walked back to the table, folded the 3 rules carefully, and placed them inside the cedar chest. They belonged with the truths that protected me. There would still be battles. There would still be pain. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like a mother who mattered. I poured myself fresh coffee, lifted the mug to my lips, and thought, the table has changed. So have I. 3 days passed before I heard from Leah or Marjorie. 3 days of stillness that tasted like healing. I spent those mornings knitting, sorting recipes, and reminding myself that preserving peace sometimes means letting others sit with the discomfort they created. I didn't chase after them. I didn't check their posts. Silence was my new posture. On the 4th day, there was a knock, softer this time, measured. When I opened the door, Marjorie stood there wrapped in a luxurious coat, her lipstick too bright against the winter sky. She smiled in that polite, polished way that had nothing to do with kindness. Adele, she said, may we talk, alone? Behind her, in the car parked by my driveway, I saw Leah watching, her face tilted down, avoiding my eyes. I stepped aside, allowing Marjorie in. Not as surrender, but as strategy. You can't understand a person's intentions until you let them speak them aloud. I led her to the kitchen. She looked around with that subtle expression some people wear when visiting a home more modest than their own. I smiled in return, because power isn't in what you own. It's in what you will not allow others to take. I brought tea, she said, holding up a small gift bag. Chamomile. Calming. I'm calm already, I replied, taking 2 cups down from the cabinet. My voice was steady, but inside I braced myself. We sat at the table, the same table where Brendan and I rebuilt something honest days ago. I folded my hands and waited. Adele, she began, with the practiced patience of someone used to controlling rooms. I'm sure you can understand how difficult our situation has become. The trust account, well, its sudden change has left my daughter and your son in a challenging position. Challenging, I repeated. Yes, actions have consequences. She blinked, thrown off by my lack of apology. I know this must be hard for you, after what happened at Christmas, but misunderstandings occur. We only want what's best for the girls. There it was, the shield, the excuse. My silence pressed her to continue. I have stepped in a lot over the last year, she said. Driving them, helping with school, giving gifts. I want to be part of their life. I want to help shape who they become. You already take the center seat, I said quietly. You made sure of that. Her cheeks flushed, just slightly, control slipping. It wasn't meant to hurt you. Perhaps we can establish a formal caretaking arrangement, a way to clarify roles and ensure support for the children continues. Caretaking arrangement. She said it like it was generous, but what she really wanted was to tie my role to money, to cement herself as the grandmother who mattered, while I became the wallet in the background. No, I said simply. Her eyes narrowed. No? No agreements. No documents that elevate you while diminishing me. I do not owe you or Leah anything. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to slice. You're risking the girl's stability. Now it was my turn to lean in. I am protecting it. She sat back, re-evaluating me. I wasn't the quiet woman she thought she could maneuver. She shifted tactics. Brendan told me you're gathering financial records, going through every expense. That seems aggressive, especially when my daughter has always treated you with respect. I laughed once, a small, humorless sound. Respect is not what happened at that table. Her eyes darted away before returning with renewed attack. Do you want to be cut out completely? Is that your aim? Because if you make this a legal battle, the girls will suffer most. Threats? I asked it. On my table? She froze, surprised I named it for what it was. She looked around again, noticing the photo frames, the toys the girls left last time they played here. A home full of proof that my absence would hurt the children more than anything she could orchestrate. I want peace, she said, softening her voice into mock grace. For all of us. Peace does not come from pretending harm didn't happen, I replied. It comes from acknowledging it. Her jaw clenched. For the first time, she seemed unsure of her footing. She stood abruptly. You're making a mistake, Adele. I rose too, meeting her eye for eye. So did you, when you sat in my chair. The air tightened between us, thick with truths she wished I hadn't spoken. She made her way to the door. Before she opened it, she turned once more. Don't make an enemy of me. I have influence. I know how to keep a family together. I stepped closer, not intimidated. You don't keep families together. You replace people. But not me. Not anymore. Her face flickered with something raw, fear maybe, because she finally saw me standing fully in my worth. And people who rely on control are always afraid of the ones who stop needing approval. She pulled the door open and stormed out, heels stabbing into the snow. Leah watched from the car, shoulders tense, eyes full of worry. For a second, I saw not arrogance, but a daughter lost between two mothers. She looked like someone realizing she backed the wrong force. As Marjorie slammed the passenger door, Leah mouthed two small words through the window. I'm sorry. The car drove away, leaving tire tracks like dark scars in the snow. When the silence settled again, my phone buzzed. A message from Carmen. Her proposal has no legal standing. Keep documenting everything. You are doing the right thing. I placed the phone down and made myself another cup of tea. Not chamomile. Something stronger. I walked to the cedar chest and rested my palm against the lid. Calm, prepared, unshaken. They thought my strength was silence. They were only half right. My strength is choosing when to speak. The first hint that something had shifted came on a Tuesday morning. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed with a notification from the county court portal. At first, I thought it was a system error. I hadn't filed anything yet beyond securing my own accounts, but the subject line erased any confusion. Temporary petition regarding trust funds. Emergency hearing requested. My breath held itself still. I tapped the document open and read the names printed in stark black letters. Leah Kane and Brendan Morgan. My own son listed beside his wife, asking the court to force access to the trust I created and funded. They claimed financial hardship. They claimed I had withheld money that was essential for the well-being of their children. They claimed urgency. They never claimed respect. I set the phone down carefully, as if gentleness might soften the betrayal. The laundry slipped from my hands and landed silently on the floor. For a moment, I stared at the wall, seeing nothing but the cold outline of entitlement. They had decided not to come back with humility. They had come back with lawyers. A sharp ache pulsed in my chest. Not from surprise. I had seen their desperation at my doorstep, but from confirmation. They still thought the trust was a right, not a gift. They thought legal pressure would scare me into reopening the tap. They did not know me at all. I called Carmen immediately. She answered before the first ring completed. "Adele, I saw the filing," she said. "I'm already preparing our response." I swallowed, steadying my voice. "They are saying I'm withholding money from the girls. They're accusing you of withholding access to funds that legally belong only to you," Carmen corrected. "We'll handle it. I'll prepare a declaration and attach the ledger once Owen finalizes it. And Samuel will confirm your authority over the trust. Everything is perfectly in your favor." Hearing that made the air feel less heavy. "Do I need to speak in court?" "Not for the initial hearing," she replied. "Let the truth speak first." Truth had never failed me before. After the call, I walked to the window. Outside, children played in the snow, building something that looked like a crooked castle. They laughed without knowing how fragile kingdoms built on the wrong foundations could be. My kingdom now stood on boundaries, legal ones. I spent the rest of the day assembling every piece of documentation Carmen might need, highlighting dates, printing screenshots, writing timelines. When numbers and receipts become your armor, you learn to organize not out of fear, but out of honor. That evening, I received a call from Owen. His voice was tinted with pride. "Everything is done. 8 years of support. Organized, annotated, indisputable. I'll deliver it to Carmen first thing in the morning. 8 years. Rent paid. Debt secretly covered. Holidays saved. Emergencies handled. I had been the safety net they never acknowledged. Now the net was lifting itself away." Later, I received a short voicemail from Samuel at the bank. Calm, confident. "I've prepared a notarized letter affirming your authority as grantor. They will have no success challenging ownership. Each person on my team respected me more than the people I raised." My laptop pinged again. A message from the hearing scheduler. The judge assigned was Harriet Bell. Known for fairness, firmness, and zero patience for manipulative theatrics. That was good. This wasn't theater. This was truth. When I opened social media, curiosity got the better of me. Leah had posted something new, a photo of the girls sitting on the couch, faces pressed into her shoulder. The caption read, "We're navigating a difficult time. Some people make choices that hurt family. Please keep us in your thoughts." Comments poured in. Sympathy, judgment, assumptions. I took a screenshot. Not because I cared about their opinion, but because false stories become weaker when the real ones are documented neatly beside them. Before bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the binder from my cedar chest. I added every new piece of evidence into its proper place. My hands didn't shake. They moved with certainty. As I carefully slid the last sheet into its sleeve, my phone buzzed again. A text from Brendan, short and desperate. "We didn't want it to get like this. We're scared." I stared at those words. They wanted me to feel burdened by responsibility for their comfort. But fear was their teacher now, not me. I typed a single sentence in reply. "Scared is not the same as sorry." I placed the phone screen down, letting the quiet settle like a blanket over the room. My house hummed with safety. My heart hummed with truth. I turned off the lights and walked upstairs. Halfway to my bedroom, I stopped and looked back. At the binder, at the cedar chest, at the chair that would always hold space for me. I realized something important. I wasn't fighting to keep a place in their lives. I was fighting to keep my self-respect alive in mine. The legal battle had begun, but I didn't feel like a woman under attack. I felt like a woman finally defended. As I slipped beneath the covers, I whispered a promise to myself. The girls will have what they need, and so will I. Outside, snow covered the world in quiet armor. Inside, I rested without apology. Tomorrow, the court would see who truly mattered. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from a restless kind of strength. The kind that arrives when you finally recognize what you deserve. I left the bedroom lamp on and brought the binder to the dining table. The cedar scent from the chest still clung to its edges, as if the past itself was standing guard with me. I spread everything out again, page by page. I had looked at these numbers so many times over the years, but only now did I see the story they told. Not charity, not obligation, love, and constant effort. College savings accounts, emergency dental bills, a water heater replacement, grocery coverage during Brendan's layoffs. Nothing extravagant. Just a mother making sure her son and grandchildren had what they needed. I ran my finger over Brendan's signature from years ago. The thank you that came in the form of ink back when he knew how much I did. Somewhere along the way, gratitude had faded into expectation. Tonight, I refused to let that revision go unchallenged. My phone buzzed. A message from Owen appeared. Check email. Important attachments. I opened my laptop, and there it was. The cash flow assembly. 8 years of financial support mapped into a chart so clear even the coldest judge would feel its weight. The total amount startled me. I had never added it all together before. Seeing the number made everything brutally clear. I wasn't just part of their support system. I was the system. Then another attachment. A list of charges on a secondary card. Designer clothes, subscription boxes, luxury spa payments, all signed under Leah's name, drawn from my credit worthiness. She had used my generosity as if it were her status symbol. I breathed slowly, steadying the hurt. These weren't surprises, but confirmation. And confirmation can be its own kind of justice. My screen pinged a second time. A recorded file from Brendan, a voice message. Hesitating only a second, I tapped play. His voice cracked through the speaker. "Mom, I know what Leah has been spending. I tried to talk to her. She told me you wouldn't care. I should have stopped it. I should have stepped in before it got this bad." He paused, long enough that I imagined him looking at the floor, hands shaking. "I'm sorry for everything. I want my girls to see what real love looks like. And I know they see it in you." My chest tightened. That message would never erase what happened, but it meant something. It was the first honest note from him in years. I saved the file and added it to the binder. Truth comes in many forms. His voice would help the court hear mine. Just as I set the binder aside, The doorbell rang. It was late, too late for visitors. I approached the window carefully and peered out. A delivery driver stood there, stamping his feet to keep warm. When I opened the door, he handed me a thick envelope. "Express delivery. Need signature," he said with a tired smile. Inside, the documents from Gina waited. Copies of the lease and inventory list for the rental house furnished entirely through my LLC. Every couch, bed frame, and dining table, including chairs that supported holiday meals I wasn't invited to, legally belonged to me. Gina had even included photos of items with purchase receipts. It was meticulous, irrefutable. If they refused to respect boundaries, then boundaries would politely pack themselves up and leave their house piece by piece. I thanked the driver and returned to the table. The binder, once just paperwork, was now a fortress, evidence of truth, evidence of love, evidence of boundaries reclaimed. I stood, stretching my back. The clock read 11:47 p.m., a reminder that soon, judgment would arrive. Not from me, but from the law they thought would force me into submission. I tidied the table slowly. Every click of a binder ring closing felt like taking back a piece of myself. My home hummed softly around me. The heating vent blew warm air near my feet, a comfort I built with my own hands. A sudden memory flashed. Ellie sitting on this very table last summer, swinging her legs and asking if grandmas could be superheroes. I told her yes. Quiet ones, the kind who fix things without capes or applause. Quiet doesn't mean weak. I placed the binder on the cedar chest for the night. My fingers lingered on the wood, drawing strength from every year I survived without applause. My heart didn't race. It stood tall. Before heading upstairs, I walked into the living room to turn off the lamp. My eyes brushed across the wall where one photo frame still faced down. I lifted it and set it upright, me holding Ellie, her tiny baby hands resting on my shoulder. Proof, pure and simple. As I reached to switch the light off, a soft knock tapped against my door. I froze, unsure if it was imagination or the wind. Then I heard it again, 2 gentle taps. I opened the door a few inches, leaving the chain lock in place. Brendan stood there alone. Snowflakes clung to his eyelashes like small confessions. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "I wanted to see you before tomorrow, to say, I'm scared you'll give up on us." I didn't open the door wider. Distance had become a form of healing. "I won't give up," I said, "but I won't be used." He nodded, tears forming. "I know," he whispered. "I think Leah is starting to know too." His voice shook as he exhaled into the cold night. "If the judge asks anything tomorrow, tell the truth. I'll back you." I studied his face. The boy who once clung to my coat now stood outside, asking permission to return to decency. "You can come back," I said softly, "but only with respect." He wiped his eyes and whispered good night. When he turned, he slipped slightly on the ice before catching his balance. A small stumble, a fitting metaphor. I locked the door and leaned my forehead against it. Love is heavy sometimes, but tonight it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like armor. I walked upstairs, crawled under the covers, and let the weight of the day settle without crushing me. The house was dark and safe. My heart was tired, but ready. Tomorrow would not decide my worth. It would simply confirm what I already knew. I mattered. And when morning came, I would walk into that courtroom not as a victim of their choices, but as the woman who survived them. The morning of the hearing arrived, wrapped in gray clouds and frost. I woke up early, my alarm unnecessary. A steady resolve had already opened my eyes. I dressed, carefully, a navy blue sweater, black slacks, a coat buttoned all the way up, not to impress, to remind myself I was someone worth defending. My binder waited on the cedar chest. When I picked it up, its weight felt honorable, not heavy, proof that love did not erase boundaries. I locked the house behind me and drove through quiet streets dusted with snow. Each turn felt like a closing chapter. The courthouse stood tall in the middle of town, old bricks touched by winter's breath. I parked and sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. My heart beat slower than I expected. Calm courage, a grandmother's strength. Inside, the air smelled like paper and justice, a strange mixture of dust and determination. Carmen was already there, a folder under her arm. Her eyes met mine, sharp but reassuring. "You ready?" she asked. "Yes," I said. We walked down the hall together. I didn't look behind me. Whatever followed would have to catch up. The courtroom doors opened to reveal a scene that felt almost theatrical. Except I wasn't acting. Brendan and Leah sat on one side, Marjorie right beside them, chin lifted as if she were auditioning for sainthood. Brendan avoided my gaze. Leah twisted her wedding ring. Marjorie stared straight ahead, composed, tense. At the front sat Judge Harriet Bell. Silver hair pulled into a low bun, glasses perched at the end of her nose. She commanded silence simply by existing. When she glanced up, the room straightened. "Case review regarding petition for access to funds," she announced. "Parties may proceed." Leah's attorney stood first, a young man, polished and eager to win. "Your Honor, this is a matter of protecting the children's well-being. Ms. Morgan's sudden and unexplained withdrawal of support has placed the minors' household in financial strain. We ask the court to restore access for their sake." Every word twisted my truth into something ugly, but I kept still. The truth would speak soon. Judge Bell shifted her gaze. "And your response?" Carmen rose, confident, calm. "Your Honor, the trust is revocable. Ms. Morgan is the sole grantor and retains full legal authority. Support has been consistent for 8 years and only paused after a concerning incident that left her dignity compromised." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Dignity, a word rarely heard in financial matters, yet perfectly placed. Carmen continued, placing documents on the table with measured precision. "We have provided a complete ledger of support, confirmed by the accountant. We have documented misuse of secondary credit cards, and Samuel Ortiz, the bank manager, has provided a notarized statement affirming Ms. Morgan maintains full control." As she spoke, she slid copies toward the judge. Each page glinted with truth. Judge Bell examined the documents carefully. "I see detailed financial contributions greatly exceeding typical grandparent involvement," she commented, eyebrows slightly raised. Brendan's shoulders curved inward. Leah's attorney rushed in. "But Your Honor, the children rely on these funds, their future." Judge Bell lifted a hand. Silence. "Children rely on their parents first." That single sentence struck like a hammer on stone. She turned to Leah. "Mrs. Kane, do you or your husband have employment?" Leah's voice shook. "Yes, but it isn't enough at the moment." "So your request," the judge said slowly, "is that Ms. Morgan continue to act as primary provider." Leah swallowed. "She always has." The judge nodded. "That is evident. But generosity cannot be reclassified as obligation simply because the giver chooses boundaries." Marjorie stiffened, lips tightening. Judge Bell looked at Carmen. "Is there any claim here that the children are at risk if trust access remains paused?" No, Your Honor, Carmen replied. The minors are safe. They are loved. And Miss Morgan intends to maintain their college savings and emergency security, independent of their parents' conduct. A quiet hum of approval vibrated from the spectators. The judge folded her hands. In that case, there is no emergency. The petition for temporary relief is denied. Denied. The word landed softly but echoed loudly. Leah's face crumpled, shame replacing entitlement. Brendan lowered his head fully now, elbows on knees. Marjorie's fingers dug into her purse strap, knuckles whitening as her influence slipped through her grip. But Judge Bell wasn't finished. However, she continued, voice firm but unexpectedly warm, I am deeply moved by the evidence of Miss Morgan's commitment to her grandchildren. Consistent involvement, supportive presence, and emotional stability. Her eyes met mine, genuine, respectful. I want to ensure the children benefit from that stability. I strongly recommend that visitation and emotional connection be encouraged. The court recognizes Miss Morgan as a protective factor for the children moving forward. A protective factor, not a burden, not an afterthought. A shield. It was the most official way anyone had ever said, "You matter." The judge tapped her gavel lightly. We will reconvene later to review the ongoing family structure. For now, Miss Morgan's rights remain fully intact. The hearing ended. Papers shuffled. People stood. Justice felt like a coat placed gently over my shoulders. Brendan approached before Leah could gather herself. His eyes were wet again. Thank you, he whispered, for not fighting us with anger. I'm not fighting, I said. I'm teaching, he nodded. A son learning late is still learning. Leah stepped toward me next. Her voice trembled. Adele, I didn't understand what I was taking from you. I didn't answer. Understanding must show itself in actions, not apologies. Marjorie did not come near. She hurried ahead, head down, as though escaping a spotlight she had once begged for. As I exited the courtroom, Samuel stood near the doorway and gave me a respectful nod. Owen texted, "Proud to be on your side." Carmen placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Outside, winter sun broke through the clouds, stretching light across the courthouse steps. I stood there a moment, breathing in the cold air that suddenly tasted like freedom. This wasn't victory over them. It was victory over the part of me that once believed staying silent meant staying loved. I walked to my car with slow, sure steps. The binder sat beside me on the seat. I reached over, tapped it gently, and whispered, "Thank you." As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, not to see who was behind me, but to admire the distance between who I was and who I had become. The day after the hearing, the world felt different, lighter but also unfamiliar, like waking up in a house you've owned for years but seeing it clearly for the first time. The court had not restored what was taken from me at Christmas. It had acknowledged what was never theirs to take. That recognition wrapped around my heart like a warm coat against the cold. I spent the morning tending to simple things, trimming the wilted ends of flowers on the counter, opening the windows to let in crisp air, and making a fresh batch of waffles for myself. The waffle recipe tin sat open beside me, as if proud to be useful again. I plated two and ate them alone, but not lonely. Every bite tasted like reclaiming something I thought I had lost. Around noon, there was a knock at the door, this time softer, more hesitant. I opened it to find Brendan standing there, hands shoved deep into his pockets, the cold reddening the tip of his nose. He didn't wait to be invited in. Not out of entitlement, but because he wasn't sure he deserved to be. I stepped aside anyway, He sat at the kitchen table, the same place we rebuilt boundaries a few days earlier. I poured him tea. He wrapped his hands around the mug like a man trying to keep hold of warmth that kept escaping. "For what it's worth," he began, "I'm relieved the judge ruled the way she did. Not at first. At first I was angry, scared. I thought we were drowning." He paused, voice tightening. "But I realized you were the only one swimming. The rest of us were clinging to you, pretending we were treading water." He looked at the steam rising from the cup, ashamed to meet my eyes. "I should have seen how much we depended on you. I should have stopped it." I sat across from him, letting silence do some of the teaching. He finally looked up, eyes red, the room's honesty stinging but necessary. "I listened to the message you sent me," I said quietly. "It meant something." He nodded. "I recorded it because I couldn't say it out loud yet. I was still hiding behind excuses." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "I want to show you something." His voice shook slightly. Inside were printouts of the secondary card statements, charges made by Leah. Not for the children, not for household needs, but for appearances and pride. Luxury without integrity. Brendan tapped a particular line. She said these expenses were for the girls, for giving them a better image. I let myself believe that. He took a deep breath. "She's terrified, not of losing money, of losing control. I think she learned that from her mother." The confession came out like a long exhale he'd been holding for months. I studied him, not with judgment, but with a mother's hope. "Fear can make us act foolishly," I said, "but love can make us act differently." He nodded slowly. "There's something else." He hesitated, gathering courage. "The night after Christmas, Ellie woke up crying. She said her chest hurt. Leah tried to soothe her, but nothing worked. Then she found the blue scarf, the one you made. Ellie fell asleep holding it, and every night since, she keeps it under her pillow. She says she dreams of your house when it's close." My throat tightened. A child's loyalty is the purest truth. "She misses you more than she understands," Brendan added. "And June copies everything her sister does, so she misses you too." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the pain soften into purpose. "I miss them," I whispered, the words heavier than any legal document in the binder. Brendan wiped his face roughly with his sleeve, as if embarrassed by his own tears. "I want them to know the love you gave me growing up. I want them to see that love isn't money. It's presence. It's showing up." He leaned forward, voice trembling. "Mom, I want to fix this. I want to earn back what I threw away." I reached out, placing my hand over his. His fingers gripped tight, like the little boy who once clung to me when thunder frightened him. "You already started," I said. "You stood with truth yesterday. That matters." He swallowed hard. "I'll keep standing there." We sat in a quiet that felt like healing. Then he stood, thanking me again, and told me he needed to be home when the girls got out of school. This time, that responsibility felt like growth, not burden. After he left, I washed the 2 cups in the sink and watched the water swirl away. The house hummed with a serenity that had earned its place. Later that evening, as I knitted on the couch, the silence shifted. Not the peaceful kind, the restless kind, a disturbance moving closer. I peeked through the curtains. On the sidewalk, under the street lamp's lonely glow, stood Marjorie. Alone, coat wrapped around her like armor too heavy to wear. She clutched her purse with both hands and stared at my house, as if it held all the answers she never wanted to learn. Her eyes glistened in the cold. She wasn't angry tonight. She was small, A person realizing her grip on a world she believed she controlled had slipped through her fingers. For a breath, I almost opened the door. Then I remembered the feeling of my missing chair. She turned away slowly, each step stiff with pride fighting regret. Her silhouette faded into the falling snow, leaving a trail of footsteps that looked like a confession she couldn't speak. I stepped back from the window and wrapped the knitted scarf around my shoulders. The girls would have their path back to me. Brendan was choosing truth. Marjorie would have to choose something else first. Accountability. I locked the door for the night, not out of fear, but out of peace. The house felt fuller. My heart felt steadier. Tomorrow could bring anything. I was ready for it. The next chapter wasn't about punishment. It was about healing. 2 days later, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was still early, the sun barely lifting itself over the horizon. I squinted at the screen. A number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. I answered, heart cautious. Mrs. Morgan, this is Ms. Daria, the school counselor at Willow Creek. I'm sorry to call so early. Ellie is having a panic episode. She keeps saying she needs her grandmother. Could you come? I didn't think. I just moved. Shoes on, coat zipped, purse grabbed. I locked the door behind me and ran to the car, the cold morning air biting at my cheeks. Snow crunched beneath my boots like the world urging me forward. My hands trembled only once when I turned the ignition, not from fear of seeing them, from a deeper fear that Ellie had believed I had abandoned her. The drive was a blur of icy roads and whispered prayers. When I reached the school, the building loomed with the everyday normalcy that felt completely undone. I hurried inside. Ms. Daria met me at the front desk, worry etched in every line of her forehead. "She's in the wellness room," she said. She asked for her grandmother by name. Those words cracked something open in me, a door I had been holding shut against hope. When I entered the room, Ellie sat curled in a beanbag chair, her little hands clutching the blue scarf. Her face was blotchy from tears, breath hiccuping in shallow bursts. She looked up. Her eyes widened. Relief washed over her like a warm blanket. "Grandma," she choked out, stumbling to her feet. I knelt, opening my arms. She rushed into them, hugging me with a force that said everything she couldn't voice. Her small fingers grasped the scarf like it was a life preserver. She pressed her face into my shoulder and whispered into the fabric, "Grandma smells like home." Those 5 words settled into me with a gentle weight. Love remembered my name, even when others tried to erase it. "It's all right, sweetheart," I murmured, rubbing her back in slow circles. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Her breathing steadied against my chest. Ms. Daria watched, quiet and respectful. She sensed this wasn't a moment to fill with advice or reassurances. Sometimes a counselor's greatest skill is silence. Ellie finally pulled back, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "June cried this morning," she said. "She wanted to bring you waffles." The image of tiny hands trying to carry comfort made my throat burn with emotion. "I'll see her soon," I promised. "Both of you." The door swung open. Leah stood there, coat half zipped, hair tangled in the rush of panic. Her eyes went straight to Ellie. And then to me. She froze. Vulnerability and shame battled in her expression, and neither won. Ellie reached for her mother's hand but didn't let go of mine. The 3 of us stood in a triangle of confusing love. "I got here as fast as I could," Leah whispered, voice unsteady. She looked at Ellie again, touched her cheek, and then glanced back at me. Tears wavered but didn't fall. "They told me you were already here." I nodded. "She asked for me." Leah's jaw trembled. I know. Her voice faltered. I know. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound came from the hum of the heater, pushing warmth into a moment still struggling to thaw. I tightened the scarf around Ellie's shoulders. She'll be okay, I said softly. Yes, Leah breathed. Because you came. The counselor approached gently. Ellie can go home for the day, she offered. Rest might help. Leah nodded and began gathering Ellie's backpack. Ellie clung to my hand, unwilling to break the connection. Can Grandma come home with us? She pleaded. Leah closed her eyes briefly. I saw a decision forming behind them, a surrender to truth. When she opened them again, they glistened with something new, humility. You can take her home, she whispered to me. Please, I'll meet you there. Shock flickered through me, but I nodded, steadying us both. Leah stepped closer and lowered her voice. I saw the way the judge looked at you yesterday. She saw what I didn't, what I refused to see. Her lips shook. You are good for them. You always were. I held Ellie's hand tighter. We're all learning, I said gently. Leah nodded. I'm trying. That was the first honest sentence she had spoken to me in months. We walked out together, Ellie holding my left hand, her backpack bumping against her small legs. At the car, she climbed into her booster seat with a sigh of relief, scarf still wrapped around her like a promise. As I drove, she hummed softly, a tiny noise that filled the car with healing. When we reached my house, she ran inside like she had been homesick for rooms she barely remembered. She inhaled the air and smiled. It smells like breakfast. I smiled back. Let's make some waffles. We pulled out the tin with the recipe. She traced the handwritten lines with her finger. The same handwriting that once helped her father learn fractions at this very table. As flour dusted the counter and butter sizzled, Ellie giggled without fear. And my kitchen felt like Christmas should have felt. Warm, messy, full of belonging. When the first waffle was ready, she took a big bite and looked at me with syrup on her chin. Grandma, she said, with certainty that healed everything. You're the one who matters. Tears gathered but didn't fall. Not yet. Healing has its own timing. A knock on the door interrupted the moment. Leah stood on the porch, eyes softer now, watching her daughter laugh inside a home she once tried to edge me out of. For the first time, she looked grateful, and I thought, maybe love can find its way back, not through force, but through children who know who their hearts belong to. A few days later, I sat on a wooden bench outside the family courtroom again. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee and floor wax, and the walls held bulletin boards filled with flyers about parenting classes and children's rights. I held my purse close, hands folded, waiting, not anxiously, patiently. There is a difference. Ellie had returned to school after a day of rest at my house. She left behind a drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands. Ellie in the middle, me on one side, June on the other. In big, uneven letters she wrote, "My family." That picture was rolled carefully inside my purse now, as strong as a legal declaration. Today's hearing was not about money. It was about time. Time with the 2 children who had never doubted who I was. Carmen arrived first, a folder tucked under her arm, her expression focused. She sat beside me. "We're not here to fight," she said quietly. "We're here to show what's best for the girls." "I know," I replied. My voice didn't shake. It hadn't trembled since the day my son told me who mattered. It seemed my heart had learned new muscles since then. Leah and Brendan arrived together a moment later. He kept his eyes on the floor, hands clasped like he was praying to a God he wasn't sure believed in him today. Leah's face was pale, her confidence noticeably fractured. They sat across the hall, not speaking, but very much together in their worry. Then came Marjorie. She swept in wearing a crimson coat, the only bright thing in the corridor, and a look that tried to reclaim territory. But territory is not claimed by fabric or posture. It is earned by love. And love had quietly retreated from her corner. Judge Bell entered the courtroom exactly on time, as if justice obeyed a schedule she personally enforced. We all stood. Then we all sat. She adjusted her glasses and sighed softly. "We're here to discuss temporary visitation arrangements in the best interest of the children," she began. Her voice carried no judgment, only authority. Leah's lawyer spoke first. He tried to sound stern, arguing that the girls should not be unsettled by abrupt changes. I almost smiled. They had been the ones to make abrupt changes, erasing me from Christmas, from captions, from a table I helped build. Children feel absence deeply. Ellie proved it when she wrapped her anxiety in a blue scarf until I appeared. Carmen stood next. "Your Honor," she said, "Ms. Morgan has been a consistent source of emotional support for the children. The counselor at school confirmed a recent anxiety episode, which was immediately calmed by her grandmother's presence." She handed the judge a sealed report from Ms. Daria. "It shows where safety lives for that child." Judge Bell scanned the paper, then looked up directly at Leah. "Is this accurate?" Leah's breath caught, her voice small. "Yes." "And do you dispute Ms. Morgan's positive role in their lives?" "No," Leah whispered, head bowing. "I don't." The truth was finally speaking in their voices, too. Judge Bell shifted her attention to Brendan. "Mr. Morgan, your daughter called for her grandmother in distress. Did you consider the emotional consequences of limiting contact?" Brendan shook his head, shame softening his features. "I didn't see what was happening. I do now." Judge Bell nodded a single time and began writing. The sound of her pen moving felt like a door unlocking. She turned one final glance toward me. There was understanding in her eyes, not pity, not favoritism, recognition. "This court orders supervised visitation with the grandmother twice a month, 4 hours each visit," she announced. "Supervision may be reevaluated after 90 days. The goal is restoring stability for the children." Reality paused, held breath, then released. Carmen placed her hand lightly on my arm. "This is good," she murmured. The judge wasn't done. She turned to Leah, voice unwavering. "Do not weaponize the children's access to their grandmother. Your responsibility is to support their emotional well-being, not your own pride." Leah's chin shook as she nodded. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Not the manipulative kind, but the painful, awakening kind. Judge Bell signed the order. The sound of her gavel was a soft echo, but it reached every heart seated in that room. Afterward, we filed out slowly. Brendan approached first. "Thank you," he said. The words were rough, honest. "You're welcome," I replied. He looked relieved that I didn't make him explain more. Leah stepped toward me next. I braced myself, unsure whether she'd cling to pride or choose humility. Her voice was so quiet I almost missed it. "I'm sorry," she said. "I thought I was protecting my family. I didn't see I was taking yours away." Regret lived in her eyes. I didn't rush to comfort her. Growth needs room to ache. "It's not too late," I said. "Not for any of us." She nodded, tears gathering again. For the first time, I believed she truly understood. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Marjorie, watching, stiff as a statue. When she realized I had seen her, she turned her head quickly, pretending to study a sign on the wall. She didn't approach. She couldn't. Her influence had cracked, and cracks let truth shine through. Before leaving, Carmen handed me a copy of the order. Proof inked into law. I tucked it into my purse beside Ellie's drawing, paper and crayon, justice and love. As we stepped outside, a gust of cold air swept past us. Brendan zipped Leah's coat for her, gentle, attentive. Small change, real progress. I said goodbye for now and walked toward my car. My boots crunched on the salted walkway. Freedom has a sound, and today, it was that crunch. When I reached my car door, I paused and looked back. Not because I doubted my direction, but because the road behind me had finally turned toward healing. Ellie would be in my home soon again. June too. They would fill the rooms with giggles and stickers and crumbs, and all the beautiful chaos that reminds a house it is still meant for family. I opened the door and smiled at the seat beside me. It no longer represented absence. It represented waiting. I whispered to myself, "We're getting closer." And for the first time in a very long while, the future didn't feel guarded. It felt hopeful. The first scheduled visit was on a Saturday. I woke early, nerves fluttering in my stomach like birds that had forgotten how to land. I set the table with quiet joy. Plates, napkins with snowflakes, a small vase of pine branches. 2 little chairs sat across from me, freshly painted and labeled by hand with permanent marker. Ellie and June. Seeing their names there made my breath catch. The good kind of ache that tells you love is still alive. I opened the cedar chest, lifting the waffle recipe tin with both hands. The lid clicked open like a memory unlocking. I laid out flour, butter, eggs, and sugar. My kitchen smelled like hope rising. The doorbell rang. When I opened it, Ellie and June stood with their coats zipped to their chins, eyes bright as stars. Brendan knelt beside them, holding their backpacks. Leah stood a step back, but not hiding. She looked nervous, like someone stepping into a room where truth lived. "Grandma!" Ellie ran to me first, scarf bouncing against her shoulders. June hurried close behind, clutching a worn stuffed penguin. I crouched to their height, pulling them both into my arms. Their giggles warmed parts of my heart that winter had nearly frozen. Inside, they kicked off boots, leaving tiny puddles that made my floor look lived in again. Ellie spotted the chairs and gasped. "That's my name!" She traced the letters slowly, as if memorizing her place. June dragged her chair closer to me until it touched my leg. Brendan cleared his throat. "We'll be back in 4 hours," he said. Not rushed, not demanding, respectful. He glanced at Leah, who stepped forward. "I wrote something," she murmured, handing me a folded note. Her hands trembled. I tucked it in my pocket without reading. Some apologies need silence before sound. They left, closing the door gently behind them. It felt symbolic. The same door they once knocked on in fear now closed with trust. Ellie hopped onto her chair. "Can we make waffles now?" she asked with the urgency of a child who knows the answer is yes. "Yes," I smiled. "You're my helpers today." Flour dusted their noses and cheeks as they scooped and stirred. When I handed Ellie the recipe card, she examined it like treasure. "Why is there so much love in this box?" she asked. Her innocence nearly unspooled me. "Because love tastes sweet," I said, helping June crack an egg. "Even when life doesn't." We poured the batter, waited for the waffle maker to steam, and the kitchen filled with that familiar smell. The one that once meant safety for Brendan, and now meant safety for his daughters. Ellie looked up at me, serious suddenly. "Grandma, why did Mommy cry after the judge talked?" Her little voice held more wisdom than she understood. I dried my hands and sat beside her. "Because sometimes grown-ups forget what matters, and when they remember, it can hurt a little before it feels better." She considered that, nodding solemnly. "Mommy said you help our hearts feel strong." My own heart pressed painfully against my chest. She's learning how strong they can be. The waffle maker clicked. June clapped. We gathered at the table, and I watched them take the first bite. Ellie closed her eyes dramatically. "Better than Christmas waffles," she declared. June raised her syrupy fork like a toast. "Better than everything." Their crumbs, laughter, sticky fingers, all proof that healing doesn't need noise, just presence. Halfway through the meal, Ellie reached for the tin again. A small green sticky note fluttered out. She handed it to me. In my own handwriting from years ago, a reminder to Brendan: add sugar if Grandma's sad. I hadn't realized I kept that tiny scrap. Tears welled, soft and grateful. Ellie read the note and giggled. "You have a secret code." "It's a recipe rule," I said, hugging her close. "Some days need extra sweetness." Hours passed in games and drawings and stories told under blankets. June lined up her penguin with my old teddy bear and announced they were friends now. Ellie explored every corner, reacquainting herself with the home she never should have lost. Time, as it always does with joy, moved too quickly. A knock sounded gently. It wasn't 4 hours yet. My heart skipped in worry until the door opened slowly and Leah stepped inside alone. She paused when she saw the scene. The girls cozy and content, my living room full of life again. Her eyes softened with something that looked a lot like longing. "We're early," she said quietly, voice cautious. "Brendan went to get groceries. I wanted to pick them up myself." Ellie jumped up and ran to her. "Mom, Grandma made 2 chairs." Leah smiled, though guilt trembled underneath. "I see that. They're beautiful." Ellie beamed. "This is my side of the table now." Leah and I exchanged a glance. Not conflict, not competition. Something better. An acknowledgement of truths we were finally speaking through actions, not arguments. "Would you like to sit?" I offered, gesturing to a chair at the end of the table. She hesitated, then nodded and sat, not in a chair that belonged to someone else, but in a place that invited humility. The girls went to gather their drawings to show her. Leah let out a breath she'd held for months. "I listened to the recording," she whispered. "The one Brendan sent you. I heard his fear, and I heard his love for you. I didn't know how much I was taking from all of you." Her eyes filled, but she blinked them clear. "When Ellie woke up screaming for you, I understood. She wasn't choosing sides. She was choosing safety." I didn't respond right away. Some apologies deserve silence before acceptance. Leah looked toward the chairs again. "You made space for them here." She swallowed. "Thank you for making space for me just now." I nodded slowly. "Space is earned by showing up." She nodded back, absorbing the lesson without resistance. A car pulled up outside. Brendan. It was time for them to go. Ellie hugged me first, syrup still in her hair. "Next time, can we make snowflake waffles too?" she asked. "Every time," I promised. June kissed my cheek, leaving a sticky print of maple love. "Love you," she whispered. quick and shy. I walked them to the door. As Leah stepped onto the porch, she turned and met my eyes fully. "Thank you," she said plainly. "No excuses, no conditions. Gratitude, unwrapped." I watched them leave. 2 chairs now empty, but not lonely. They would be filled again soon. When the house quieted, I stood at the table where crumbs still waited to be wiped away. I didn't rush to clean. I wanted the evidence of healing to sit there a little longer. I pulled out the folded note Leah had given me earlier. I opened it slowly. "I see you. I'm sorry. Please help me be better for them." I set the note beside the recipe tin. Forgiveness isn't immediate. But today, we took a step. Not by asking, by doing. I placed a hand on each tiny chair and whispered, "You belong here. And so do I." 1 year later, Christmas came again. Not with glittering promises or performances for social media, but with a quiet joy that felt earned. Snow covered the roofs and lawns like a clean page, and my house glowed with a warmth I had rebuilt from silence and courage. I stood in my living room arranging a small centerpiece, pine branches, and a candle that smelled faintly of vanilla. The blue scarf hung by the coat rack. The waffle recipe tin waited on the counter. 2 little chairs sat across from me at the table, freshly polished, their names still written proudly. This year, none of us had to wonder who belonged where. Brendan arrived first. He carried a bag of groceries and a shy smile that seemed to appear more often these days. He set the bag down and hugged me, strong and sincere. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said, and the way his voice wrapped around the word Mom felt like a gift all on its own. A moment later, the door burst open and cold air rushed in along with tiny feet. "Grandma!" Ellie and June ran inside, shedding coats like excited little birds. Ellie threw herself into my arms, nearly knocking me backward, while June squeezed between us, giggling. Their laughter filled the room with the exact sound Christmas should make. They noticed something beside the table and gasped in delight. A new chair sat there, smaller, painted pink and yellow. A new name card rested on its seat. Maya, the stuffed penguin June carried everywhere. "I didn't want your friend sitting on the floor," I told her. June pressed her cheek to my side, her way of saying thank you without words. Leah stepped inside quietly, closing the door behind her. She looked more grounded now, gentler. Motherhood had softened her instead of hardening her. She held a Tupperware container and lifted it slightly. "I brought my attempt at waffles," she said with a nervous laugh. "Attempts are welcome here," I smiled. "Success comes with practice." She breathed easier, hanging up her coat beside mine. We settled into a comfortable rhythm, cooking and chatting. The girls helped whisk batter, their hands steadier now, their giggles louder. Brendan set the table, humming a carol under his breath. Leah placed her waffles next to mine like an offering of peace. When everything was ready, we gathered around the table. The same table that once held only silence and boundaries now held food and forgiveness. Ellie climbed into her chair and looked up at me. "Grandma, can you sit in your special chair?" she asked. I followed her gaze. At the head of the table, a name card rested upright in simple black ink. Adele, my name. On my chair, the chair that had once been taken from me, the chair that started all of this. Leah stepped closer. "We made it together," she said softly. "Brendan and me. We wanted you to know that your seat is never in question again." Brendan nodded, eyes bright with unspoken gratitude. Ellie bounced in her chair, proud of her parents' growth. June stared at me as though waiting to see whether happiness made a sound. I sat, My hands rested on the arms of the chair, grounding me in a victory that didn't need applause. We joined hands. Even Leah reached across the table willingly. Brendan bowed his head, and we thanked God for waffles and new beginnings and second chances. The first bites were delicious. Ellie smeared syrup on her cheek and didn't care. June fed a crumb to Maya the penguin and declared she liked it. Leah tried her waffle and blushed. "Yours are still better," she admitted. "That's all right," I said. "We can share the recipe." We spent hours together, eating, unwrapping small gifts, laughing over old stories. Brendan helped the girls build a puzzle on the floor. Leah and I washed dishes side by side, silence comfortable instead of cold. At one point, Ellie leaned against me and whispered, "I'm glad you're back." "I never left," I whispered back. "You just couldn't see me for a little while." She nodded with the seriousness only children possess when they understand something important. Later, when they bundled up to leave, Leah lingered by the door. She looked at me directly, no shields left. "Thank you," she said again. But this time it was more. It was a woman acknowledging another woman. A daughter-in-law acknowledging a mother. Respect, finally resting in its proper place. Brendan kissed my cheek. "See you next week for dinner?" "Yes," I smiled. "My house, my table." The girls hugged me twice each before piling into the car. They waved through the window until the car rounded the corner and disappeared into falling snow. I closed the door and leaned against it, letting the warmth of the day settle into my bones. The house was quieter now, but not empty. The sound of love remained in the walls, in the chairs, in the kitchen that still smelled sweet. I walked back to the dining table, fingertips brushing each name card. Ellie, June, Maya the penguin, and mine. Adele, a small rectangle of paper, a monumental declaration. I picked it up gently and held it against my heart. I thought back to the moment a year ago when a different name card sat on a chair that should have been mine. How it pushed me out. How it pushed me forward. How it taught me that walking away is sometimes the first step toward being welcomed back properly. The doorbell rang again. I turned, surprised. When I opened the door, I found Reverend Cole standing on the porch, his breath fogging the air. "Stopped by to wish you Merry Christmas," he said kindly. "I knew today would be significant." "It was," I replied. He smiled, eyes soft with understanding. "You kept faith in yourself, in love, in healing." He tipped his hat. "That is courage." I thanked him and watched him walk away, his figure fading into the soft winter dusk. Inside once more, I turned off the lights and stood for a moment in the quiet. Snowflakes tapped the windows like tiny reminders. You endured. You changed. You chose peace. I sat in my chair, my rightful place, and whispered to the empty room, knowing love would hear me anyway. I lost a seat at their table, so I set a table of my own. And they came back. The house, the chair, the scarf, the recipe, all witnesses to a truth long overdue. I mattered. I always did.